April 1994. Inside a quiet house in Seattle, the world was about to lose one of the most influential musicians of an entire generation. The voice that defined the anger, confusion, and rebellion of the 1990s suddenly went silent. That voice belonged to Kurt Cobain, the frontman of the legendary band Nirvana. But behind the fame, the screaming fans, and the millions of albums sold, there was a darker story. A story of pain, pressure, addiction, and a mind struggling with the weight of sudden global fame. Today, we are going to uncover the true story of Kurt Cobain, from a troubled childhood in a small American town to becoming the reluctant icon of the grunge movement, and finally to the tragic ending that shocked the entire world. This is not just a story of a rock star. This is the story of a young man who changed music forever, but couldn't escape the demons inside his own mind. Kurt Donald Cobain was born on February 20th, 1967 in Aberdeen, Washington, a small logging town in the United States. At first glance, Aberdeen looked like a quiet working-class community, but for young Kurt, life there was far from easy. As a child, Kurt was known to be creative and energetic. He loved drawing, music, and performing for his family. His relatives often remembered him as a happy kid who enjoyed singing and banging on toy drums. But everything changed when Kurt was 9 years old. His parents went through a painful divorce, and this event deeply affected him. Friends and family later said that after the divorce, Kurt became withdrawn, angry, and emotionally unstable. He felt abandoned, confused, and lost. That emotional wound would follow him for the rest of his life. During his teenage years, Kurt found something that gave him purpose: music. He was inspired by punk rock bands and underground music scenes that rejected mainstream culture. Bands like the Melvins, Black Flag, and Pixies had a huge influence on his musical taste. Kurt started experimenting with guitars and songwriting. His style was raw, emotional, and honest. Unlike many musicians who tried to sound perfect, Kurt embraced imperfection. His music reflected anger, confusion, and vulnerability. These feelings would eventually become the foundation of the grunge movement. In 1987, Kurt Cobain formed a band with bassist Chris Novoselic. They named the band Nirvana. At first, the band struggled. They played in small clubs, underground venues, and local shows where only a handful of people showed up. Money was tight. Sometimes Kurt slept on friends' couches or lived in cheap apartments, but everything changed in 1991. That year, Nirvana released an album that would completely transform the music industry. The album was called Nevermind. No one expected it to become a massive success, but what happened next shocked the entire music world. The album's lead single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, quickly became a cultural phenomenon. The song's loud guitars, rebellious lyrics, and raw energy captured the frustration of an entire generation. Within months, Nirvana went from playing small clubs to selling millions of records worldwide. Nevermind knocked pop superstar Michael Jackson off the top of the Billboard charts. Almost overnight, Kurt Cobain became the voice of Generation X. But fame came with a heavy price. Kurt Cobain never wanted to be a traditional rock star. He felt uncomfortable with the attention, the interviews, and the constant pressure from the media. Journalists analyzed his lyrics. Fans treated him like a symbol. The music industry expected him to keep producing hit records. But Kurt struggled with severe personal issues. He suffered from chronic stomach pain that doctors struggled to diagnose. To cope with both physical and emotional pain, Kurt began using heroin. His addiction slowly became worse. At the same time, his relationship with musician Courtney Love became one of the most controversial topics in the media. The two married in 1992 and later had a daughter, Frances Bean Cobain. While some people believed they loved each other deeply, others criticized their lifestyle and drug use. The media attention only added more pressure to Kurt's fragile mental state. In 1993, Nirvana performed one of the most famous acoustic concerts in rock history, MTV Unplugged in New York. Instead of playing only their biggest hits, Kurt chose to perform emotional and stripped-down songs, including covers of lesser-known artists. The performance revealed a different side of Kurt Cobain. Behind the loud guitars and aggressive sound was a deeply emotional songwriter. Many fans later described this performance as haunting, especially considering what would happen just a few months later. By early 1994, Kurt Cobain's life was spiraling out of control. His addiction had worsened, and he was struggling mentally and physically. In March 1994, Kurt was hospitalized in Rome after an overdose that was initially reported as an accident. Some people later believed it may have been a suicide attempt. Friends and family became increasingly worried. Shortly after returning to the United States, Kurt entered a rehabilitation center in Los Angeles to treat his addiction. However, he left the facility only a few days later and returned to Seattle. For several days, no one knew where he was. Then, on April 8, 1994, an electrician working at Kurt's Seattle home made a tragic discovery. Kurt Cobain had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was only 27 years old. The news shocked millions of fans around the world. For many young people in the 1990s, Kurt Cobain wasn't just a musician, he represented their emotions, frustrations, and identity. Thousands of fans gathered in Seattle to mourn his death. His music suddenly took on an even deeper meaning. Songs that once sounded like rebellious rock anthems now felt like cries for help. Even decades after his death, Kurt Cobain remains one of the most influential figures in music history. Nirvana helped bring alternative rock into the mainstream and inspired countless musicians across the world. Albums like Nevermind and In Utero continue to influence new generations of artists. But Kurt's story also serves as a reminder of the hidden struggles behind fame. Behind the millions of records sold and the iconic performances, there was a young man dealing with pain, pressure, and expectations he never asked for. Kurt Cobain once said, "I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I am not." Those words perfectly describe the legacy he left behind. He never tried to be perfect. He never tried to fit the mold of a typical rock star. Instead, he gave the world something far more powerful: honesty. His music captured emotions that many people were afraid to express. And even though his life ended far too soon, his voice continues to echo through every distorted guitar, every emotional lyric, and every artist inspired by his work. Kurt Cobain may be gone, but the impact he left on music and culture will never disappear. If you enjoyed this video and want more deep stories about music legends and mysterious histories, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.